Hello, FedPhoenix fam. So, tonight I'm going to make a video about the best and the worst of prison staff. And I say prison staff because I'm not just referring to guards, I'm referring to administrators. I'm referring to people that are kind of in between administrators and guards, the people that work in the units but aren't actually guards, but they're not quite administrators, the counselors, case managers, case workers, building managers, unit managers, that kind of thing. Which actually, for the sake of this video, I'll just refer to them as admins as well, just so we can kind of easily differentiate admins from guards, right? So, a lot of times people ask me, they say, hey, I'm a woman and I'm going to federal prison. Am I going to be raped? This is a oddly common concern. As far as the inmates, absolutely not. In higher security facilities, like women's FCIs, or if you go to a max, it's possible because just like most rape, it would be used as a form of intimidation or punishment, for lack of a better term, or just to hurt you. But in a camp and even in a low, that's not realistic, for the most part. More often than not, you're pretty safe at assuming that's not going to be even a plausible issue. But I will say that before I went to Alderson, I, of course, did a lot of internet research, and I found out that at one point there was, in fact, a guard who was a captain, which is like the kind of guards who are in charge or whatever of the other guards, who was a serial rapist. And you got to Google this, because this guy is like the most hideous looking person you'll ever see in your life. Like, his face looks deformed. The whites of his eyes are really jaundiced and yellow, like really just looking guy that had raped God knows how many women, a lot, over the course of an extended period of time at Alderson. But that was long gone and over with, months, maybe years before I came there. And I know that that's highly unusual in these environments. So, as far as, inmate staff relations, I think that with some staff, there's kind of a flirty thing going on with some of the inmates, a little too friendly. Those are called the buddy guards, Sometimes the buddy guard is a little extra nice in a suggestive way. Sometimes it's just in a weird, like, friend way. But the buddy guards are on the list of the bad guards, the worst, because the buddy guards also are like snakes. They will turn on you real fast. So you may be favored by this person, given extra leniency for a period of time, and then one day they're just in a mood, and guess who gets to be the victim of that? And now the same person they were giving extra leniency to, the buddy guard will then target to be extra petty and harsh with, because you've developed a close connection with them. So now you're the beneficiary of their grace and of their wrath. But having said that, let's hop right into it. I'm going to do the worst first and get that out of the way, and then we'll do the best. Because there were actually some people who worked at Alderson that, I can, at the end of the day, say are genuinely good people. Can't say that about, most are kind of in the middle somewhere, but definitely the majority are either kind of neutral or leaning towards not good people. But there were some good people. So, of the worst. Oh, and there was, I think, one undocumented, unreported situation where a prison staff member was intimately involved with an inmate. And the inmate was not, you would have thought it would have been like this hot, young, but no, it was a woman of a certain age who looked like she had made some real bad lifestyle choices and had no intention of quitting that. And this particular guard was not a friendly guard. You would think that someone who's having a consensual, and, people say, well, it can't be consensual if you're an inmate. I think as grown folks, if you pursue them or they pursue you and it leads to something mutually agreed upon, that's consensual to me. And I don't think being an inmate changes that. I think if a staff member uses their position or authority to pressure you into something that you don't want on your own or you're uncomfortable with, then that is unconsensual. But this one particular situation, one of the worst of the staff members, you can guess on the list which one it was, and I'm not going to tell you if you're right. But those of you who were there when I was there will definitely know exactly what I'm talking about. He was just an angry, bitter person, and at the same time is having this weird relationship. And it's like he would sneak her condiment packets, but he was horrible at the hand-to-hands, you know what I mean? So it was very obvious to those of us who know to watch these kind of things, just because of a sense of over-awareness. he would like sneak her, like hand her condiment packets, in the cafeteria for meals that we didn't have condiments for. Or she worked in the kitchen. Well, I gave up the department the guy works in, huh? But and so she would stay after her shift with a really alarmingly high frequency, and most of this time spent alone with him privately in an office. Like it was very apparent. I don't know what exactly she was getting out of the deal other than mayonnaise packets. Ooh, that could go a lot of ways. I was referring to the condiment, by the way. Um, I mean, it's obvious what he was getting out of the deal, but it was just they were an odd couple. They're two people that side by side you wouldn't think he'd be the type to even go there with anybody because he was just too bitter. And you wouldn't think that she would be the kind of person who a man who has access to hundreds of women would pick to be like the one. But then again, maybe that's why they meshed the way that they did, is because they weren't an obvious likely two people to be in this situation. I don't know. But so on the worst list, I wrote a list. We'll start with Angry Kitchen Guy. Um, Angry Kitchen Guy was one of the worst because he was very petty. He liked to threaten people with write-ups and hand out write-ups. And he was really just, sometimes the kitchen would throw away excess food. And if there's a meal and there's obviously excess and it's the last group, who gives a crap if someone puts an extra piece of chicken on a tray? I mean, when there's obviously it's going to go in the trash or in a plastic glove and down someone's pants to get smuggled up the hill otherwise, and someone's legitimately hungry, feed them. And he just wasn't going for it at all. And, just really, a stickler for the rules, in the worst of ways, in a controlling, sadistic type of way. So, just a very unpleasant person. Number 2 on my list of the worst prison staff would be the buddy guard. The buddy guard is someone who's your buddy, or pretends to be, because you gotta think too, in a camp, things are much more lax. People are showing up and, in casual pants, jeans a lot of times, random hoodies out of their closet they probably have had since high school, and tennis shoes or hey dudes. And so even though we're all in either gray sweats or khaki uniforms, things are a lot more laid back than they are in higher facility, places. And camp is just not one of those places where if it's obvious that you're kind of cool with one of the staff, where people assume like you're a snitch or whatever. And a lot of people snitch on each other in camp. Some do it quite openly. And there's really no repercussion for that. So, the culture is very different than what you in your head would visualize as prison. But the buddy guards are one of the worst because, one, they show favoritism that causes harm and unnecessary stress to other people. And two, when they switch up, because they do this periodically, they also will show a great deal of extra bias and harshness to the buddy inmate or buddies. And some people, some staff, are more lenient with particular groups, whether it's religious groups, racial groups, whatever, people that they visualize as more like them, perhaps economically. And some guards are harsher to various groups, along the same lines. But the buddy guard is really just an odd bird. There's one thing, it's one thing to be considerate and respectful and professional and balance those things and be humane. But it's something totally different when you're just showing like a weirdly high level of favoritism towards a particular individual or group, and knowing that can switch on the drop of a dime. It's really like this weird toxic bipolar situation. So the third worst group of prison staff would be what I call the playing God admins. These are people who are on a power trip like no other. They have the little bit of power they have as prison administrators, and they use this to hand out just inappropriate, non-fitting consequence when people get in trouble. Just really harsh, unnecessarily, really oppressive. And they're the people that, like the crooked warden, who held me and several inmates months, in some cases years, beyond the time they should have served in prison due to personal bias. And having a stage to play that out and against other people and affect their lives, and it's really kind of gross. Or the admins that are particularly kind of callous, and unless you really butter them up and stroke their ego, and then you might get treated the way that you should, as a human being. So the playing God admins, who ironically a large percentage of the people that get on this power trip love nothing better than to, aside from, look down their nose at you, is to tell you how glorious their religious preference is and how, you should follow that because, make your life better. But meanwhile, you see them being just bitter and just miserable people. Another group of bad staff, the worst prison staff, would be what I call the night shift terrorizers and a-holes. These are people who, when you need to be woke up in the wee hours of the morning when it's still dark out for a medical trip, right? These are the people that, or for any reason really, even if it's just to go down the hill and be dealt with for a disciplinary issue. In the middle of the night sometimes they would have people go down the hill right out of bed in the middle of the night to go talk to a lieutenant, of the guards, about their write-up and what their consequence will be, which is so just weird and crazy to me. But these particular people, the night shift terrorizers and a-holes, are the ones who, instead of coming to the entrance of your cube and yelling your name, hey, Thompson, what they'll do is they'll walk right up on your bunk and then they'll yell really loud, your name, or they'll flash their light in your face and yell your name. Or some of them have even gotten down to where they yell your name, flash the light in your face, and kick the bunk at the same time. And like I've said in previous videos, a lot of these women have a lot of pre-existing trauma before prison. And the lack of security and privacy and certainty in the prison environment really does horrible things to them psychologically. So being abruptly woken up in an aggressive, loud fashion with a light in your face in the middle of the night is really traumatizing for some women. Some women have been known to just kind of break down when this is done to them and get very upset and emotional and need to be calmed down by their bunkie and it's okay, girl, we got to get your crap together and just do what you need to do. And these people enjoy doing this. They do it because they can. That's the whole playing God thing, on the guard level, not the administrative level. And I think some of them enjoy it. They just find it entertaining because we're so dehumanized to them that terrorizing us is fun. And there was one woman who, and I'm not one to talk about other women's appearances or body styles and use that as a way to mock them. But I will say that this particular woman and her general appearance was naturally very unattractive. And it did her no favors that she came across as a very miserable, just kind of bitter, unhappy person. I don't know if she's getting the crap beat out of her at home and she comes to prison to have her chance to kick somebody while they're down, or if she just is such a crap person outside of the prison like she is inside. But in the free world, she knows she can't just treat people any kind of way because that comes with repercussions, that she gets to act out and play out, her fury or what. But she would just be so petty. And camp is a petty place. The inmates fuss over petty things and argue over petty things. And, and some of the guards, especially the worst of guards, can be super petty, and write you up for almost nothing and not care how that affects you or your quality of life or the time you spend in prison. Those things don't matter to them. They're irrelevant. But this one woman who would work night shift was a really, really, really miserable person. She just oozed animosity and just bitterness. And she would frequently be oh, I had to go over to medical to get dressing, to get wound care, right? At one point, for the MRSA I caught. And, the first couple of days I went over before they gave me a graze pass, which the whole time I was there, I was the only person I've ever seen get a graze pass. I had to go in uniform. And so, but I think I was wearing my uniform somehow improperly. Maybe I didn't have the belt on. But again, I have this gaping hole in my back that is being packed, I was in a lot of pain. And so I was heading over and she stops me. It's what are you doing? Where are you going? And I'm I tell her, and she's oh, no, your uniform is not correct. Go back. And then I'm well, if I go back in the unit and fix myself to your standard, by the time I come back out, I'll miss the window of time to actually get the wound care that I have to have. And that just wasn't acceptable to her. So I had to miss wound care. Wait till my next wound care, because at that point I was on 3 times a day wound care because the situation was so dire. And by the time I got to wound care, there was like necrotic tissue and pus like seeping out of my sealed in plastic, phone book size, massive gauze on my back. And she didn't bat an eye. Actually, I think that was the case, but I think when the day shift came, I didn't have to wait completely until the next actual dressing change time. I was able to explain the situation to a guard who was being reasonable and humane and was like, let me call them and, go ahead and go over. Because this is a medical hazard for everyone around you at this point. But so those people are horrible. Another one of the groups of the worst of prison staff would be the indifferent medical staff. You will have a lot of medical staff who just over the years or months have become so, desensitized. And you get a lot of inmates who try to run a lot of crap, who try to run a lot of scams to get out of work, through medical, or try to get medication they really don't need, or get medication they can trade on camp for other things. So they get a lot of fakers and a lot of nonsense. So I get where that would make a person kind of callous over time. But some of the medical staff are like painfully, dangerously indifferent to what you're telling them in your suffrage. And then the last of the worst of prison staff. One particular person comes to mind as an example for this, and we'll call him the sadistic hottie, because he was notoriously known on campus as being a very physically attractive man amongst the female guards and amongst the inmates, of course. But one day, he had a weird side to him. Like, you would get a write-up, and instead of like you just facing the disciplinary consequences for that, he would give the option of, would you want to do extra like chores, extra work duty, and we'll throw the write-up away. And it would be weird stuff, like go outside and, sweep the gravel off the road, for this section, which would be just something really nuts. I think he had one person mop the grass, like just really weird things that for his own entertainment. But I'll never forget one day he was talking to a female staff member and another female guard. And, he was kind of bragging to her and trying to do the whole machismo, I'm a tough guy, kind of thing. And he's bragging about how he had worked in high security men's facilities and how he had worked in several of the West Virginia regional jails, which are notorious crap holes, by the way. And he was like, yeah, we would throw flashbangs in the holding cell and they'd be bleeding out of their nose and their ears and you ever shoot somebody with a beanbag gun? Oh, that's fun. We used to do it all the time, to shoot them with the beanbag gun. And he was bragging openly to her. And she even looked kind of like uncomfortable, like, whoa, this is some psychiatric crap that I did not sign up for. But he was bragging about how he had harmed and harassed, unnecessarily inmates in the regional jails for his own entertainment. And it was really, wow. So those are like the worst, in my opinion, my perspective of the prison staff. Let's get on to the best, right? Because we're 18 minutes into this, and, I don't want to make this to be a super long video. So one of the best, two of the best, actually, the two top on my list, I'm not going to mention them by name, but one was a woman who was kind of tomboyish and very soft-spoken, and kind of a lot of people gave her the runaround. People really ran over her and took advantage of her a lot because, she was too nice, and you can't be too nice in this position because just like if you're an inmate, if you're a staff member and you're too nice, people will take advantage of you and they will make your life a lot more frustrating than it needs to be. But she was so incredibly sweet. And I remember overhearing one day her talking to another staff member about that she was taking her mother back and forth to Ruby Memorial here in Morgantown, West Virginia for cancer treatment, which from where we were at Alderson is like a 4 or 5 hour drive. And it really was profound to me because my mother had got diagnosed with cancer before I came to prison. And I took her to Ruby to get her surgery to remove half a kidney due to renal cell carcinoma. And I knew that when I came home, we may find the cancer isn't completely gone. And I may be making a lot of trips back and forth to Ruby to take care of my mother. And so even though she probably didn't even know I knew this about her, I really kind of had a soft spot for her. You know what I mean? I really could tell that she's just a genuinely good person and a very self-sacrificing person, perhaps to a fault, And, I just really liked her a lot, But another one who also worked in the education, both these ladies worked in education, was a smaller woman, also soft-spoken, not someone to be pushed around, she could stand her ground perfectly fine. But she also knew that we were human beings. And she treated people with a level of respect and compassion that showed that she in fact was a decent human being, which is a commodity in these places. Um, and there were several people who were really kind of in a tailspin, in a turmoil, because for a long time we didn't get our FSA credits, or you get them in big chunks, months of them all at once, boom. And there was a lot of ups and downs with the BOP figuring out how to calculate all this and work this out, because we were the people who were in prison when all this was came to be and began to be implemented. And through trial and error, sometimes people were getting wrong information and whatever. And it got to the point where the mailroom would not tell people what their comp sheet said. And she's like, I have access to that information. There's no reason why you shouldn't have access to it. It's about you. And she gave people some of the information off their comp sheet, which they were fully entitled to. I think she actually got in trouble for that. But it was a humane thing to do. It was a compassionate thing to do. It was the right thing to do. And even though she gave people this information, she said, look, I can't guarantee you that this is even correct, because right now the system is all wonky. Um, she offered people some peace of mind and some clarity that they otherwise would not have had, because no one else was showing that level of consideration. So shout out to that. Definitely some of the best staff work in education as far as just being decent human beings. But these two particular ladies, I really have a lot of respect for. So, number 3 on my list of best prison staff may be shocking to some of y'all. One of which, when I first came to Alderson, we called her Wednesday, right? We didn't even know her name. And because I was in a quarantine unit, so it was me and a whole bunch of other newbies. None of us had been in general population, and they kept dumping more in as they came, until the unit filled up. So over the course of months. But we called her Wednesday because she worked on Wednesdays on our unit. And people would be like, you can't be having laundry hanging up, on Wednesdays, because Wednesday works, You better have your cube clean because it's Wednesday, Wednesday's coming, in the afternoon shift. I didn't mind her. I mean, yeah, it kind of sucked that if I'm washing my whites in the shower, my socks and bras and underwear, I can't do it, or I have to have them down, like out of sight, before she works, because we weren't supposed to do that. And you would get in trouble. Like, she definitely, but here's the thing. Is when it came to Wednesday and a couple other, staff who were notoriously like the guards that were stricter, they were rule followers, if you were doing something that you knew you should not be doing, they weren't going to give you much, if any, leeway. But the reason why they made it to the best list for me was because these people were and they were all women guards too, but they were very consistent. You always knew when you seen them what to expect. And at least one of these 3 women, I was confident had a military past. The way she walked, the way she carried herself, she had a very demanding presence, and it almost made me feel more secure when she worked, because I felt like if, God forbid, some lunatic, because our camp didn't have fences and barbed wire, if some lunatic decides to run up in here and start doing something crazy to us, she's going to be someone who's not going to be running for the hills. She's going to stand her ground, and she's going to do her job and, protect us. Now, will she protect the guard before she protects me? Absolutely. I mean, they're like gang members. But she's going she ain't running. She ain't running. She's going to stand her ground. She's going to fight. And she's going to do what she knows she's supposed to do and what she feels obligated to do. And I liked that about her, because, it always would kind of, when you're in prison, you're bored. So you kind of think out all these scenarios, no matter how unlikely they are. And sometimes I would think, what if there was like a riot, or a crazy person came onto camp with, God forbid, a weapon? And you kind of size up, like, which staff are going to kind of go run in an office, lock themselves in and hide while they're calling 911, and leave the rest of us out to get slaughtered like sheep? Or which ones, when they know they can't physically overtake the crowd if there was like a riot situation, are again going to lock themselves in an office, or, just try to grab a couple other guards with them, take them to safety, or actually going to step in and protect the innocent. And she was one of those people. And I actually told her a couple of times, I said, you were in the military. And she said, nah. Now, some of the guards, were proudly former military, but she would say, no, I wasn't in the military. And I'm like, yeah, you were. What branch? And, and I don't care what anybody says. She could show me documentation today, and I would not believe that she had not been in the military. Her level of situational awareness was very high, but not in a paranoid way, just in a very smooth, she knew what was up, and she was very conscientious, and she was very thorough. And I liked that. I liked the staff. Even if you're more likely to write me up for doing something, it's okay, because if I know that and you consistently are that way, then I just know that when you work, some of the little nonsense, the little petty stuff I might be doing that I shouldn't be doing, I can't do. But what I also know is I don't got to worry about getting in trouble if I'm not doing something I shouldn't be doing. With the rest of the guards, there was such a high level of inconsistency and miscommunication and misinformation that you never knew from day to day what these people were going to write you up for, what their personal pet peeves were going to be for the day, or whatever. And so it was a very stressful situation for us, and I'd imagine even for them and their coworkers. So I liked, the Wednesday guards. I liked the three ladies, Wednesday in particular. Wednesday is one of them, but the three ladies who were notoriously like by the book, because as long as you had read your handbook and you were doing what the heck it says you need to be doing, you were good on their shift. And these are the women, particularly the one who I thought had a military, I highly suspect has a military past. She not only was like, because the other two, I mean, if things were to jump off and it was like a mass situation where there was real danger, they would definitely, be locking themselves in an office. But the one that I thought had military history, I knew 100% she's going to step in. And if she sees another guard, like attack one of us, she's going to step in and at least get them off of us. Whereas most of the other guards, and I did see a woman get attacked by guards while I was there, by the way. That's a whole other prison story. Most of the other guards, would just turn the other cheek, or heck, some of them would even join in, or they would stand by the side clapping and cheering, like old Mr. Sadistic Hottie. But she was one that I know was not going to let anybody, guard or inmate, be unnecessarily harmed. And that gave me such a strong sense of security in her presence. And ironically, she was one of the guards on a couple of the medical trips I was on. And she could sing her butt off. I mean, I was like, how is this woman, this very serious woman who, and she could just, I mean, she could sing like heavy in tears. It was just, she had an incredible voice. But you only knew that if you had been on medical trips with her, because on medical trips, things are more laid back. You're not in the prison camp, and the radio's going, and it was just, for a minute, you're not an inmate. You're just a person on a road trip with the girls. For a second here and there, you would get snippets of almost feeling like you weren't an inmate in the best of ways. But you also knew, don't try to pull any nonsense, because she's going to shut that crap down now. So another group of the best of prison staff would be the humane and reasonable admins. There were admins who were very reasonable people. If you came to them with a logical or a just, argument or whatever, they would hear you out and they would give you fair consideration. Or they had a level of humanity that they allowed themselves to see gray areas where they legitimately existed. And God bless those people, seriously, for all the good that they do. And then the last group of my favorite, the best of prison staff. Not that I, was a bootlicker or someone who's like, whoa, I love the guards. No one loves the guards. They're the freaking guards. I mean, really. But you definitely, especially when you spent more than a year in prison, you definitely get to a point where there's a very real contrast, a very, very obvious differential between the best and the worst. And of course, then the multitudes in between the two extremes. But the last group of the best prison staff would be the compassionate health services people. There are some health services people that, even though they were, kind of forged in the fire and very take no nonsense, they still managed to have a small glimmer of compassion that you could see it periodically shine through just a little. And that was so refreshing. When I had to get wound changes and they had to, take an entire bottle of packing out of my back and scrape it and clean it and repack the whole thing and then gauze it up, there were a couple staff who, when I would be holding onto the mattress face down in the medical department with tears from pain running down my face, and I would just be kind of trying to breathe through it, kind of white knuckling the situation, that when I would flinch from when they're hitting nerves in my back and stuff, exposed nerves, I could feel their hands kind of draw back, or when the wound was at its worst, there were a couple people that I could actually feel them kind of shaking a little bit, which made my pain worse physically, but mentally made me feel better because I'm like, this is a person who knows what they're doing is causing me physical pain, but it has to happen. And they're not enjoying it. The fact that there were people who definitely weren't enjoying my suffering gave me hope, because you get so accustomed to people enjoying watching you suffer and enjoying having a little power over you, and in the worst way, that when you see people that show any sign of not being that in prison, it just really is a very joyous thing. And I can say, when I was dealing with the wound care situation in particular, um, I definitely feel like at that point, all of the medical staff were very reasonable with me on that one particular situation. And, several were relatively compassionate and humane, which really, really was amazing for me to go through. I almost didn't even know how to react to that, because they had been so indifferent to other very serious medical issues I had prior to this. But on that particular issue and through that process, they definitely did right by me. They didn't do right by me on a lot of levels medically, but in that context, the wound care for the massive MRSA, they did right by me. Other than the fact that they wouldn't give me pain medication, which is insane, and other than the fact that I had to have an outside surgeon, kind of go against BOP protocol and slice it open and drain it and scrape it out to begin with, because they weren't doing that either, which needed to be done. But once that was done, it was just a wound care issue, with a giant hole in my back. I think that really kind of the shock and awe of the extreme harm that I had really kind of softened them up to me a little bit. And that was cool. That was nice. And not in a way where I was like manipulating them or even wanted to, but in a way that I could tell, in spite of a lot of things, that there was some humanity there. And there was certainly a certain level of consideration that was new to me to experience from them. So hats off to them for that particular situation, at least. But the compassionate, coming across a compassionate health service staff member can be the difference in life or death in some prison situations, particularly if you're like in Alderson in a camp that is an isolated satellite camp in the mountains with 700 women and no doctor on staff. Good luck. You better hope to God that you are fortunate enough to get to deal with some health services staff that aren't willing to be grossly indifferent to the fact that you're a human being. So that is the best and the worst of prison staff. I didn't want to go into naming names. I really kind of slipped up with the whole department issue with the one of the worst, because I really didn't intend to do that, because I want to be as vague as possible. But yeah, that is the best and the worst of prison staff from my perspective. So with that, good day. God bless. If you like the video, feel free to share. If you've not already subscribed and you are willing to do such, please do. My Cash App and PayPal will be in the description if you'd like to donate to the channel. Oh, excuse me. Oh my gosh, that's all that supplements and crap I gotta take for that stupid hernia. But anyway, if you need to reach out to me for any reason, my email will be in the description as well. So again, good day. God bless.